China's cut sleeve, love and whispers and silk. 2,000 years ago, in the heart of the Han Dynasty, the palace glowed under lantern light. Its courtyards whispered with the shuffle of silk shoes and the rustle of banners. But the most powerful stories were born not in grand halls, but in the quiet chambers where affection dared to unfold. You are a young attendant, summoned into the world of emperors and nobles. One night, you find yourself lying beside Emperor Ai of Han, a ruler whose authority stretched across China. You drift into sleep, head resting against his embroidered sleeve. When morning comes, he stirs. To wake you would break the spell of tenderness. To move would disturb your fragile rest. So he does something both simple and daring. He draws a knife and cuts away the fabric. Better to ruin a robe than rouse his beloved. This act, the cut sleeve, Duan Shao, became legend. It was retold in poems, painted in scrolls, whispered as a metaphor for same-sex devotion. For later generations, it was not just a story of love, but a symbol that intimacy could bloom even under the strict order of empire. Yet, within that same palace, the jester was also dangerous. One loose tongue, one servant gossiping in the kitchens, and tenderness could transform into treason. In imperial China, affection between men existed in a paradox. For emperors and nobles, indulgence could be cloaked in status. Their power insulated them, at least temporarily, from scandal. For attendants, however, every smile and every new robe carried risk. A servant promoted too quickly, too often at his master's side, became a target for envy. Rivals whispered, was this loyalty or something more? And if suspicion hardened, the outcome could be brutal. Imprisonment, disgrace, even execution. But still, desire persisted. Why? Because marriages were often cold alliances between families, more political contract than partnership. Genuine warmth was rare, and so when men found affection in one another, they held onto it, even under threat. For them, the cut sleeve was not only a symbol of love, it was proof that in a world of masks and ritual, the heart could still choose. The legend of Emperor Ai and Dong Xian endures because it captures both sides of LGBT history, the beauty of intimacy and the danger of exposure. A torn sleeve could mean safety one day, scandal the next. And that fragile balance between secrecy and visibility, affection and fear, would echo across empires and centuries. History remembers dynasties by battles and borders, but sometimes what survives is something smaller, softer, a piece of silk cut in the name of love. From tolerance to bamboo canes, the Qing dynasty turned. Centuries passed, dynasties rose and fell, but the story of the cut sleeve lingered, a quiet reminder that even emperors once risked their robes for love. Yet by the time the Qing dynasty ruled China, the climate had changed. Intimacy between men had not disappeared, but the cost of being discovered had grown far heavier. In the Han era, a noble's affection might have drawn whispers. By the Qing, it could draw law. Western missionaries, Confucian moralists, and shifting political ideals brought with them a stricter view of desire. Where once same-sex intimacy could be tucked into poetry and hidden in private gardens, now it was named a crime, a disruption of order, a breach of morality. The punishments were not subtle. 1 month of imprisonment, 100 lashes with a bamboo cane. To the outside world, such a penalty might seem lighter than the tortures found in other empires. But for those who endured it, the humiliation was as sharp as the pain. Each strike was meant to remind not only the body, but the soul. Freedom comes with a price, and passion leaves scars. Imagine the contradiction. In public, marriages remain cold, transactional, arrangements made by families, not hearts. Husbands and wives fulfilled duties, produced heirs, and kept appearances. Yet in the shadows, longing persisted. Men slipped into tea houses, exchanged glances at the opera, or found excuses to linger together after banquets. The warmth they sought could not be found in arranged unions, so they risked their reputations for fleeting hours of tenderness. This paradox defined Qing China. The same society that celebrated beauty in art and verse sought to punish it in flesh and law. A nobleman might be shielded by rank, but his servants risked everything. A soldier might write a poem to his comrade, but never dare to sign his name. And still desire persisted, carried like a secret flame that refused to go out. For LGBT lives across history, the Qing dynasty offers a familiar echo. Visibility is dangerous. Invisibility is suffocating. Love must hide in coded letters, in silk fans painted with double meanings, in songs that only those who shared the same longing could understand. And yet, hiding never made it disappear. In the end, each stroke of the bamboo cane told the same truth. Societies can punish bodies, but they cannot extinguish the need for connection. The cut sleeves still whispered beneath the blows, reminding lovers that passion outlives punishment. The Mexica paradox: ritual, body, and punishment. Half a world away from China's silk palaces, another empire thrived, the Mexica, whom the Spanish would later call the Aztecs. Their capital, Tenochtitlan, was a marvel. Canals glimmering with sunlight, marketplaces buzzing with voices, temples rising like mountains of stone. Here, religion was not separate from life, it was life. Every harvest, every battle, every sacrifice tied humans to the gods. And in this cosmos of blood and devotion, love between men walked a perilous edge. For the Mexica, intimacy between men was more than a private matter. It was judged as a disruption of divine balance. To be caught in an act of passion with another man could mean death. Yet the punishments revealed a deeper paradox. The role you played determined your fate. An active partner might face strangulation or swift execution. A passive partner, however, was branded with the worst dishonor. His punishment was designed not only to kill, but to erase dignity entirely. Why such severity? To the Mexica, the human body was a vessel, an offering to the gods. To take a role that society marked as submissive was not just shameful, it was sacrilegious, a wound in the sacred order. Punishment became ritual. Justice became spectacle. The body itself was transformed into a stage where law, religion, and violence converged. Yet, beneath these laws, desire persisted. Warriors formed bonds in training fields. Young apprentices whispered secrets when the fires dimmed. Poets wrote verses that hinted, softly, cautiously, at tenderness between men. Even in a world where punishment was harsh, longing refused to vanish. And then came the conquistadors. Hernan Cortez and his soldiers brought with them a harsher judgment still. To the Mexica, intimacy between men was dangerous, but rooted in cosmology. To the Spaniards, it was the pecado nefando, the unspeakable sin, an offense against God himself. What had been ritual cruelty became Christian spectacle. Men were flogged in plazas, executed before crowds, torn apart by war dogs to send a message. This was not just illegal, it was unforgivable. The irony is sharp. The Aztecs punished the same-sex desire as a breach of ritual order. The Spaniards punished it as heresy. Two systems of morality, two different justifications, but the same outcome. Lives destroyed, love silenced. For those who lived through this collision of empires, intimacy became an even more dangerous act. And yet, as always, love left traces. In songs, in art, in whispered memories, The Mexico paradox endured, a culture that celebrated beauty and sacrifice, yet condemned tenderness between men with merciless hands. The Catholic conquest, sin and spectacle. When Hernán Cortés marched into Tenochtitlan, he carried more than steel, horses, and gunpowder. He carried a worldview in which desire between men was not just taboo, it was heresy. The Spaniards called it pecado nefando, the unspeakable sin, so foul that to name it aloud was to invite shame. Where the Mexican had seen same-sex love as a rupture in cosmic order, the conquistadors reframed it as rebellion against God himself. The punishments matched the rhetoric. Public whippings tore open backs under the eyes of jeering crowds. Men were marched to the stake and set aflame as warnings to all. In some cases, prisoners were thrown to war dogs, their deaths made into spectacle. Justice was no longer ritual, as with the Mexican. It was theater, designed to terrify, to purge, and to assert the authority of the cross. For indigenous people, the shift was devastating. Once, desire had been harshly policed, but still woven into cosmology, an extreme form of balance between gods and mortals. Now, it was cast as a stain on the soul, an offense so grave it demanded eradication. A warrior, once judged by his courage in battle, could now be condemned for the intimacy of his heart. But repression is never perfect. Beneath the weight of sermons and executions, memories survived. Families whispered of roles once honored, of loves once acknowledged. Some songs still carried double meanings, their verses cloaking tenderness in imagery of flowers and stars. The colonizers might burn bodies, but they could not burn memory. The irony is cruel. Spaniards proclaimed themselves bearers of civilization, yet their punishments were often more brutal than those of the Mexican they condemned. They insisted on moral superiority, but their actions revealed another empire eager to control not only land and gold, but desire itself. For the men who lived under this double burden, indigenous law replaced by colonial law, intimacy became doubly dangerous. A brush of hands, a lingering look, a night stolen from duty could be enough to end a life. To love differently was to live in shadows, to measure every gesture against the risk of discovery. And yet shadows are never empty. In them, resilience grew. Lovers learned to hide in plain sight, to cloak affection in ritual, to build lives in the narrow spaces left by empire and church. Even under the banner of the cross, love found ways to endure, whispering through the centuries that no sin, no spectacle, no execution could silence it forever. Athens and Rome, roles, rules, and the politics of desire. While Spanish priests condemned love as sin and Aztec rulers treated it as sacrilege, in ancient Athens the same love was bound by custom, not annihilation. Here, relationships between older men and adolescent youths, known as pederasty, were woven into the fabric of civic life. They were not only sexual, they were educational, a mentorship that combined philosophy, athletics, and preparation for public duty. At first glance, it seems like acceptance. Poems celebrated male beauty, vases depicted intimate scenes, and philosophers debated the ethics of love between men. Yet even in this seemingly open space, invisible boundaries shaped every relationship. The younger partner was expected to show restraint, to avoid appearing too eager. His role was temporary. Once he reached maturity, he was expected to marry, have children, and leave the mentorship behind. To linger too long or to appear too submissive meant shame. Rome inherited these traditions but sharpened them into something harsher. Here, the central issue was not age, but role. A free Roman citizen could take pleasure with male slaves, prostitutes, or foreigners without endangering his honor, so long as he was the active partner. To be passive, however, was to fall into disgrace. The stigma was profound. A man who received another was branded unmanly, placed socially alongside slaves and traitors. These rules turned desire into political weapon. Senators and rivals hurled accusations of passivity to destroy reputations. A whisper about a man's private life could topple his career faster than charges of theft or corruption. Love became ammunition. Intimacy transformed into scandal. And yet, desire still pulsed through the empire. In gymnasiums, in bathhouses, in the quiet corners of banquets, men still sought one another. Poets wrote verses that shimmered with longing. Ovid, Martial, and Catullus left behind lines that dared to name desire, sometimes tender, sometimes biting with satire. The marble statues of athletes, the frescoes hidden in villas, these were testaments to a world where beauty and intimacy between men were admired as they were constrained by rules. For LGBT history, Athens and Rome reveal a haunting pattern: tolerance tied to conditions, acceptance bound by performance. You could love, but only within the role society prescribed. Step outside it, and admiration turned to mockery, respect to humiliation. It was never as simple as freedom or repression. It was a tightrope walk, a game of roles and appearances. And for those who dared to play it, every glance, every gesture carried the weight of risk.